Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Here Be Dragons. Excuse me, springtime allergies. Uh, Welcome back to Here Be Dragons. I am your host, Steven Stark. Joining me this week, John, my tried and true, my internet husband, my other half, and noted Star Wars lover, Jared. Anytime it's Star Wars, Jared will show up. I mean, unless he's busy saving somebody's life, you know. But like Nessie's off saving people's lives this week, so we got the second best medical professional we know to come in.
I heartily endorse that second best, if that,
Right?
if it's to Nessie.
We love you, Nessie. We'll see you next week. But yeah, we're here to talk Star Wars, obviously. But when I said we'll see Nessie next week, we'll just say that off the top. There is going to be no live stream next week on Here We Dragons because me and John and Nessie will all be in Ohio. A lot of you who watch the streams, I know some of our friends who watch on the regular are going to be there. And yeah, if you see us there, come say hello to me, please. Make me feel like my life has value and worth. Come tell me that you like me. It will validate me in ways that, yeah. Anyway, digressing off that point, no stream next week because we will be in Ohio.
Finally, I'm just so excited to be with you guys
in real space.
Yeah.
But again, like we're going to be trapped inside a lot at the weekend. By the way, it's supposed to rain.
Oh God.
Oh no! What will we do?
As you know, I'm a very outdoorsy person, so that's
right. Well,
that's going to be tough.
I mean, y'all probably know that I actually am an outdoorsy person, so I don't love that it's going to be rainy. But like, oh no, I'm going to be stuck inside with my friends. What am I going to do? But anyway, enough about that. We'll talk about that and maybe a little bit more at the mid-roll. But Star Wars, specifically like the back half of Mandalorian season 3. That's what we're really talking about. I mean, I'm sure we'll reach back to other things. But yeah, episodes 5 through 8 is what we're really talking about here. And I'm going to throw it to Jared. I already know the answer, but like, I would like for you to say it out loud. How did you feel about the back half of this season?
I loved it, while also liking to think that I am clear-eyed about some of its imperfections.
Okay.
I feel like in terms of some of the content that we got, particularly in the last 2 episodes, it was everything I could have wanted. But I also have to reckon with what I often find myself preaching to others when it comes to engaging with Star Wars storytelling, and all storytelling, which is engage with the story that was presented to you, not the story you wish was being told.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think I fell a tiny bit into that trap with some of the ways where I just innocently thought the season was going, and it ended up not being that way, which is good, which is fine. But I kind of found myself appreciating how refreshingly direct I found the storytelling throughout the season, and particularly in the last half, while also being somewhat frustrated by it. And for context, I would say it's because I have started to connect more and more to the Mandalorian as it has become more and more connected to the larger Star Wars galaxy. I was not quite as enamored with the show back in season 1 when it was essentially the lone wolf and cub, and not quite as connected to some of the larger saga storytelling that we knew. That changed in season 2, and I started to get more on board with the show. And I really felt like season 3 had kind of cracked the universe wide open and made it that it was really telling the story of this era. And that came with somewhat of a reduced focus on Din, but I was okay with that because we were getting stories with Bo-Katan, we were getting stories about the Mandalorian people, we were getting stories about the New Republic, and I was there for all of it. And that was further highlighted by, since we've last talked, there have been a couple big changes. Namely, we got Star Wars Celebration, and we got the announcement of what is being effectively billed as the climax of this entire era of Star Wars storytelling in a movie directed by Dave Filoni. And I feel like that, that was paired with episode 7, which was kind of blew the door wide open to all the connections that this story could have with the upcoming Ahsoka series, with whatever is going on with Thrawn, with the sequel trilogy era, and I was just like totally enamored with it. And then the finale kind of brought things back and reminded me, in a good way, and also in a way that challenged me a little bit, that this is ultimately still a very simple and direct story, and the finale was focused on tying up that story almost to the point where, I'm sure we'll get into this theoretically, it's not, but it could have been a series finale. And I do not, and I'm happy that it's not, because I do think that when season 4 of The Mandalorian comes back, or wherever we see Din and Grogu next, it will be, a clean slate where we can build off everything that's come before, but not be tied down by some of the threads that were present throughout the first 3 series. But I wasn't necessarily expecting this much resolution, and I found myself surprised by it, and I just needed to kind of take a step back and recognize, okay, you were expecting something else, and this is what you got, and it's perhaps not exactly what you thought it would be, but was it a story worth telling? And ultimately, I think it was. Again, there are some elements of it that I think perhaps could have done better. I know there's one episode in particular that John's not going to be happy about. But I do share some of his concerns about that episode, but I feel like overall I was satisfied.
Okay. Well, that was not succinct, but you know what? This is why we have you. You had actually quite a bit to say in there, and it was a little more nuanced than I anticipated. You're generally just so dang positive about Star Wars. And that's part of why I love having you on here. We don't, if you come on as a guest and you just crap all over the thing the whole time, you don't get invited back as the guest, you know what, John, do you want to go next, or do you want me to?
No, I'll go.
Okay.
And it's funny because I think, Jared, you and I are going to be focused on 2 different sides of like reservations that we had about these episodes. Because I actually think that I was perfectly fine with the resolution of the final episodes. The only thing that took me back was I was surprised they actually managed to do it, because it felt like they were moving so slowly building up to it that we were just going to get a tease of where they were going, and season 4 was going to be a lot of this stuff. So I was actually surprised that they managed to pull it off in a way that felt satisfying to me, because the last 2 episodes really are kind of like a big movie, and I think that's why it worked so well for me. Episode 5, I enjoy. I don't know if it's one of my favorite episodes, but it has a lot of great action. And even though it's got the real weirdness of Swamp Thing pirate, but I've kind of warmed up into that. Episode 6, which I won't dwell on long here because we'll get into it when we go in depth on that. I have found elements in the episode over the past week and a half or so that I like and can say, I see what they're doing there. That's interesting. But on the whole, it's, for me, the worst episode of this entire show. And and like, for anybody who was on Zoom, like a night or 2 after the episode dropped, I think it was, maybe a couple days after, I went so hard on ripping the episode to shreds. So much so that maybe I'll be able to hold back a little here, but I'm still going to be blunt. For various reasons, which we'll get into, the episode does not work for me. And so it's a blip on, I think, otherwise a good set of back half episodes. And I'll be honest, taken together, I think chapters or episodes 7 and 8 of this season are probably my favorite of the entire series. So it's interesting how balance works. It's like I was fuming after episode 6, but you know what? Episode 7 and 8 brought me back because I love them so damn much.
Okay. Again, nuanced, layered. Allow me to retort. I actually really enjoyed the back half of this season, with the notable exception of episode 6. And a lot of that is just down to the casting and characterization of a few key players in that episode. I have nothing, like, I love Jack Black. I love Lizzo. I love Christopher Lloyd. But it felt like a little bit too much crammed in all at once. And with characters that are a little bit half-baked, in my opinion. Jack Black is just being a Jack Black guy. You know, he's being that guy he is when he plays any character almost for the last 15 years. I love him. I think he's hilarious. But, like, it didn't mesh for my feeling of Star Wars. And, like, I'm the first one to recognize that Star Wars isn't just for me. Star Wars is for a lot of people. But, like, I did not jive with the episode, which upsets me because, like, Bryce Dallas Howard directed that episode, and she directed some stuff in the previous couple of seasons that was some of the best stuff in the show up to that point. So I didn't love it. And I want to get that out of the way up front so that I can spend the whole rest of the time that we are here talking about the amazing stuff that I just loved. This show is playing with your action figures in the backyard, and you know, you can tell when Christmas comes because there's a cool new ship shows up. You know, you can tell when the toy breaks because the Darksaber broke. You know, oh no, well, we got to keep playing without it now. And there's also, like, I said this in the last time when we talked about the first half of the show. They just do the thing. We're gonna go retake Mandalore. Not spend next season getting ready. No, we're going to go do it right now. This show does not spend a whole lot of time making you wait for them to go do the thing they said they were gonna do. I mean, who really thought that we would get Mandalore back in 8 episodes based on where we started? Right? So.
Well, I will say, they say we're going to go retake Mandalore, but not before we take this ridiculous, diversion into Jack Black and Lizzo territory.
And like Lizzo knighting Grogu was, I'm like, this feels like a Super Bowl commercial.
Yeah,
it took me out of the episode.
We really need to get through this first because I do want to get on to the positive.
And then I'll finish mine. But you know what?
I'm not going to hold back. It was ridiculous for me. If it was fine for other people, that's fine. But like the minute that they enter into the dining hall or whatever, and Jack Black starts talking, I was in bed watching the episode, and I literally threw my arms up in the air because I was like, and excuse me, but I was like, what the fuck? It's because I had already been growing a bit tired of like cameos, and this like just took it up to the nth degree. Jack Black, who to my mind is completely out of place, especially doing his Jack Black thing. Although I will say, like, there's been a couple times since I've rewatched the episode that I can see he's actually trying to put on like a performance, but he's always going to be Jack Black to a certain degree. Lizzo, with all due respect to her, and this is nothing against her whatsoever, but I think somebody else mentioned in the chat, she's not an actress, and it was obvious to me watching this. And maybe, I don't know, you said it, Stephen, if it was any one of these elements, Jack Black, Lizzo, Christopher Lloyd by themselves, maybe it could have worked, but like all three of them together was just so much. And I don't think the writing was all that great to support them. Again, you said that characters felt kind of half-baked, especially Christopher Lloyd's character. It's like we barely got any motivation on him, and when we did, arguably his best material, when he starts talking about how he's a separatist and Count Dooku, then he gets zapped by Bo-Katan, who just rolls her eyes and goes, politics. It's like, so we're not taking any of that seriously at all. It's just,
no, we're playing.
All this is a big joke.
We need to play in the sandbox with our action figures.
Well, I don't know if people have been saying that a lot, but I think there's some very serious storytelling that goes on in this show.
I'm obviously being reductive when I say that, but
so, and especially the fact that, like, we just got finished with an episode saying, you know, it is time to retake Mandalore. We're flying into, you know, the third act, and we're taking time. And if you want to do a side quest, that'd be one thing, but there was so much about this episode that was just, it took me out of it. And I actually, it's funny because a lot of people cited the Mon Calamari stuff in the beginning. I actually love that. As a fan of Clone Wars, that felt like right at home. That was, and that tied back to the Mon Calamari arc in Clone Wars with like the royalty and all that. And I actually liked a lot of the droid stuff in the episode, because we even got a B1 battle droid, which, as you know, I think we Clone Wars fans have grown quite, you know, fond of those guys. And not all the stuff with that landed. There's the question of whether all the droids should feel as happy as they do about being in service to the humans.
I was still in the middle of my thoughts when you had to make sure you complained about episode 6. I'm going to cut you off and go back to my thoughts.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Because except for with the exception of episode 6, which has redeeming qualities, despite the fact that I was consistently pulled out of the story by the, it's an ugly term, but stunt casting, is what it felt like. You don't need that Mandalorian. You're actually better without it, in my opinion. That being said, the rest of it, God, I loved it, actually. I genuinely loved it. Down to Grogu riding around in IG-11's corpse and, speaking just the brilliance of allowing him to say yes and no and only that for a short period of time. It's like the storytelling that they did for Grogu in this back half, especially in 7 and 8, was really just so good. He's been more of a MacGuffin much of the time in this show, but he really got to be an active character, especially in like this, we'll just say 2-part finale, the retaking of Mandalore. Which gave me some of my favorite visuals I've ever seen, because they did some things in the airborne cavern fight that Star Wars has never done before, that I was like, hold on a second, rewind, watch it again, rewind, watch it again, which is not like typical for me, but I just had to see it. And that shot, the tracking shot over the shoulder of that trooper early in the action, and then all of a sudden the armorer comes out of nowhere and lays into him with the hammer, that first like over the shoulder POV shot, that's when I knew, I'm like, oh, they're about to go off. And I had no idea what we were in for. By the end of it, I'm ready to say that might be my favorite live action Star Wars fight I've seen. if you, especially when you include the elements of, if you, well, no, I can't pull in Din Djarin and, you know, Moff Gideon and all that stuff because that's really is a separate thing. But the canyon fight is just one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen. That airborne with melee combat and the anime shots where they're like holding on Bo-Katan and everything's rushing by behind her that looks just like anime action lines. My God, they blew me away, y'all. I fell in love. I can't even like. I will talk about other episodes, but I'm going to keep coming back, especially to this finale. It did not reach the emotional high of season 2's finale because Luke Skywalker, you know, what are you going to do? It's hard to beat Luke Skywalker for me. But holy cow, like the fist pumping action, this, and I'm not a guy that you win over with action generally. But I was so bought in because of the stakes they had established. All right, now I'm done with my general overview. Fantastic. Season 6, episode 6 feels like a convenient way to just take care of the Darksaber, make Grogu cute, and grab those Mandalorians and get them into the group. And it felt very sort of like easy. All right.
I will say what I wish that, and I typically don't do this because I'm with Jared. I prefer to engage with the story that I'm presented with and not go off on, well, this is what they should have done. But I'm going to make an exception on this one time because especially when the episode starts off with the Night Owls and all, and the title is Guns for Hire. I thought we were headed into an episode that would be primarily concerned with the privateers, and this force that Bo-Katan is going to have to reclaim, because I wanted to spend time with them as we're heading in to recruit them. And I actually think that would have made the finale even stronger if and I feel that way about the covert too, because I feel like one of the problems with when you have a group of characters who are masked is that it's kind of hard to like single them out and empathize with those characters. So I would have also liked some more time spent with them building up. See, that's the thing. I have zero problems with with the 2-part finale of the season. I think my problems are generated from building up to it, because I just think we could have gotten more. And I think episode 5 was not 5. Episode 4. We're not talking about episode 4, but if that episode had been a little longer and given time to spend like more time with the covert, and especially maybe establish some more of a relationship with Paz and his son, which we don't get much of. Just stuff like that. I wanted more, and I think that would have been a better way to utilize episode 6, or maybe even fold the privateers into the story and having to begrudgingly work side by side with Din and Bo, throughout the episode, and then you end the episode with the big fight for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's all like, would have, could have. I'm also not a professional writer, so I'm not going to tell anybody how to do their job. But
and getting mad about it doesn't do any good either.
Yeah, we got what we got.
I had my moment of like, I did not love it, but like, there is so much good going on in these 4 episodes that I don't need to, we had our say about what we don't love. Jared, is there anything you'd like to get more specific about not loving?
Well, yeah, if we are focusing on episode 6, what I will say about it is, I mentioned this when I first watched it, was it felt very much like an episode of Clone Wars, which should be a compliment in the sense that, I love Clone Wars. It's one of my favorite things in Star Wars. It just perhaps felt a little bit out of place in this season. Because, for instance, with, it was the one episode this season that I thought was that we were actually going to see more of, when I thought it would just be a quest for Din's redemption with the Mines of Mandalore, which was like, I will help you do this one thing, but first you must do this thing for me, aka, you know, video game fetch quest kind of logic.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I object to that necessarily, but it was essentially an outlier in that way, and it happened to take place in this community. I actually found the Plazier 15 part of the episode to be quite fascinating. It was more like this kind of idyllic society that's trying to move beyond the trauma of, you know, past wars and try to have a direct democracy. Like, all that stuff's like fascinating stuff. And again, if this had been in an animated episode of Clone Wars, I think it may have played better. In fact, you could have had those exact characters, Captain Bombardier and the Duchess, in an animated series, perhaps even voiced by Jack Black and Lizzo, and I might not have found them quite as distracting.
But that's not the tone they've established for this show.
Exactly. And so, and I don't want to lay it all on the feet of Jack Black and Lizzo, because they are performers. They were doing a character, even if it is characters that were, in Jack Black's case, pretty specifically in their wheelhouse. I do understand John's concerns and your concerns, Stephen, about the idea of stunt casting, because this show has done stunt casting before, but it's rarely been this obvious. Mm-hmm. And that's partly because Jack Black is a bigger name than a lot of the typical stunt castings that we've had. But it felt, for the most part, like, you know, The Mandalorian's one of the biggest shows in the world. Jon Favreau is very well connected. He's got a lot of friends in the industry. This felt a lot more like Jack Black and or Lizzo being like, hey, I love The Mandalorian. Can I please have a role on the show? And Jack Favreau being like, yeah, man, come on in, play in the tent. And it just was perhaps not the most elegantly constructed part of the season and the series. I do actually appreciate, for instance, that, like, when it comes to the Captain Bombardier character, that he was not the villain that everyone expected him to be as the former Imperial. That was part of he actually had reformed. And I appreciated that what the show was trying to comment on with Christopher Lloyd's character about being someone who was clinging to the past and, like, refused to allow his notion of what was the right and wrong to evolve. It just was, again, painting in perhaps broader strokes than I think that was warranted. And so I ultimately was like, I appreciate the story for the story. I am sorry that it kind of got swept away by, like, the distraction of the casting. It will not be my favorite episode of the show, but it's not something that I would say broke my immersion within the world of the Star Wars story. There are very few things that would do that. Something like, say, breaking the fourth wall would totally take me out of it. In this case, I was like, I think that this probably could have been a bit more elegantly constructed, but ultimately I'm willing to, you know, live and let live and move on. Especially because the rest of what we got was
okay. Great. So we've literally spent 25% of our stream time talking about this now.
Well, not all of it. We talked about
fair enough. But
I have some final things to say, because I do want to be clear. Like, and I respect your position, Jared. It did break my immersion. It felt like, oh, so Star Wars has turned into Sesame Street this week. And so, yeah, but I will say the episode has some good ideas. It's just unfortunate that the execution is so, I'm just going to say it, bad. But I actually love the idea of, and even the stuff that they go into with the planet being a pluralistic society and, like, respecting different religions, that's setting up kind of what we're looking towards in the finale with the different tribes, like, making peace with each other and tolerating their differences, which I think is the place we kind of seem to arrive at the end. We'll see in the next couple seasons, if tensions arise again. Things, even in Star Wars, are not necessarily always that simple, and so I'll be very interested to see what they continue on with the Mandalore plotline. But for now, like I think that's one of the things that they were hinting towards, and so the ideas of the episode are actually quite enjoy, but the packaging is just so wrong. But with that said, I'll let it go for now. Stephen, I also wanted to make sure that I was giving enough material to the people like Aaron who showed up for my negativity.
Who showed up to hear you complain specifically? Yeah. Right. So
it was an awful episode.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. We do need to give our audience what they want.
Yeah. So, but I'm more than happy to now move on because the rest of the season,
it was great.
These episodes was great.
I mean, who would have thought that Paz Vizsla would end up being Paz freaking Vizsla? You know what I mean? Like, okay, we got his like rallying speech at the end of episode 4, so like we definitely started to see that turn. But man, just the way he went out in episode 7. And I'm not, and it's tropey as hell, I'll hold them off. It's tropey as hell, but Star Wars has been tropey as hell since its inception,
Well, and we talked about this a little bit, Stephen, whereas like, and the Mandalorian, whatever else you want to say about him, this includes episode 6, like, Filoni especially, I don't know like the division of who's in charge of like what elements of the show or where they come together, but I'll say Favreau.
I'll make the chart and I'll show you later.
But as we all know, Filoni was very much George's apprentice, and like this has always had the spirit of George's Star Wars. So I think that's why when we had the conversation about Andor and how I think both you and I want to see more in the vein of Andor, but I think that this is like right on the mark, like the Star Wars that George Lucas, would have been striving for. And
that's an interesting point you make, because Andor really did shake up the way I'm looking at Star Wars these days, because I really was getting to some Star Wars burnout. People who are longtime watchers of the channel will know that, I was beginning to cool on the franchise overall. Never was going to hate it, obviously. Like Empire Strikes Back, still greatest movie ever made. I'll fight you. Like I did not love a couple of series, like Book of Boba Fett and what was it after that? Obi-Wan. Both of those were kind of hit or miss for me. So I was just like, do I really care about watching every Star Wars show? And then Andor came along, and it really changed the way that I thought about Star Wars storytelling. I'm like, give me Andor and give me Mandalorian. Whereas I guess maybe Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan both felt too similar to the formula of the Mandalorian, so it was all feeling very samey to me. And then Andor came along and showed me they're doing something different. So then I came back to this season of The Mandalorian thinking, okay, I can get behind this again because they're giving me these other things. Give me a Star Wars children's show aimed at 7-year-olds, but give me The Mandalorian also, and give me Andor. The universe is wide enough and the fan base is wide enough to warrant all of these different types of shows. You don't have to have the cute droid being funny, as Andor proved that, because we all loved that show. I mean, droids being cute and silly is part of Star Wars, but it's not the only thing. And there are plenty of times where Star Wars doesn't lean into the Force, doesn't lean into spaceship battles, depending on what you're watching, doesn't have droids or whatever, doesn't have politics. But Star Wars has all of these things sometimes. And the best Star Wars blends it all together, I think. I want to talk about something a little more specific. I'm going to talk about Gideon.
Yes.
Is Gideon gone? Is he gone?
Yeah,
Yes.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
But I just gotta say, man, vanity, thy name is Gideon. Because, oh my god. And he's even more of a few screws loose than I thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But it's so great.
I found Gideon to be a fascinating villain across the entire show, but I really did appreciate how these final episodes, that I do believe are his final episodes, kind of brought him into a more clear picture, in the sense of, I believe there was a question earlier in the chat of, was Gideon like a Mandalorian who joined the Empire, or did he just want to be a Mandalorian? I think he gave us this answer in this episode, which is, he is someone who, as John mentioned, is incredibly narcissistic, but who wants to appropriate, essentially, the best aspects of all of these wildly diverse cultures that he encounters, and sees them for himself to make himself the true power.
He's the ultimate colonizer.
Yes, he is. And it's, and I found that they actually executed that quite well, in the way that both, throughout his time engaging with the Mandalorians, but in particular that scene, which might have been one of my favorite scenes in the season, if not the entire show, the opening of episode 7 with the Imperial Shadow Council, where we got to see that all of these diffuse power players who are still around after the Empire falls.
Pelion!
Yes, Pelion. And Brendel Hux and Moff Gideon. Yeah, but essentially they are in an alliance, but they're really all out for themselves. This is the dark side in practice, the sense of, they are using one another. They do not trust one another. They do not value one another. They are working together because they have to, because they are fractured and they need each other's resources to avoid being destroyed by the New Republic. But they're all looking for the opportunity to get themselves up on top. We see that with when Pelion is trying to play the long game. He seems to be the most measured one, who is like, once we get Grand Admiral Thrawn back, we will be able to fully consolidate our forces. Clearly, Brendel Hux, is working on something in the unknown regions with the First Order that we know eventually leads to Snoke and Palpatine. But Gideon is like, I don't want to wait. I think that there should be new leadership, and I think it should be me. And I think it should not only be me with my awesome new Beskar Dark Trooper armor, which I would have killed for that figure as a child, but also, I think I should have the Force too. We got that, we got the answer as to what those cloning experiments were. And I thought it was a fascinating choice that, ultimately Gideon is not trying to bring Palpatine back or make a Snoke. He's trying to level up himself.
Yeah.
And but did it work?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just said, and John said it was the hubris that got him in the end, because he, he couldn't stand to have anyone else but himself be the figure of the power. And in the end, he was just down to himself against the united front of the Mandalorians being stronger together. And what did it get him? Fire and ruin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say that, I kind of loved the layer I would add to that is that it does harken back to everything we've seen from him up to this point comes back down to why did he have Grogu in the first place? Well, they didn't exactly connect A to B to C to D, but you definitely have A from the beginning of the series, and you definitely have D here at the end. And you can see that to figure out that he was trying to figure out how to isolate the Force so he could give himself Force abilities or his clones Force abilities. And if you think back to the end of season 2, he had the robotic dark troopers that probably led to the development of his Beskar power armor that he's wearing, because it's not just regular Mandalorian armor. Mandalorians walk around and they don't make those like servo sounds. Gideon is making like a robotic with every move he makes in that armor, implying that it is enhanced. Also, he punches the floor at one point and dents solid steel. So, yeah, he's incredibly enhanced, which gives him a huge advantage in the fight with Din there in the finale. So let that sink in, that Din Djarin was still whooping his behind. You know what? Screw it. Whooping his ass all over the place. He really was. He was getting the better of him really until the Praetorian Guards showed up.
Yeah, and I found that like an interesting kind of dynamic that emerged in the sense that, you know, both Din and Moff Gideon it started off as a one-on-one, and then Gideon brought in the ringers with the Praetorian Guards. But then, you know, Din had allies too. Grogu was helping him. Bo-Katan was helping him. And the Bo-Katan, you know, Gideon had the best of her. He beat her. But she ultimately prevailed, and so did Din, because the three of them were working together. Whereas it felt more like Moff Gideon was using the Praetorian Guards, as they were, basically as father to to take out the enemy in a dishonorable fashion. And it ultimately didn't pay off because, you know, Din and Grogu worked together to defeat the Praetorian Guards, and when Bo-Katan was at Gideon's mercy, Din and Grogu came to her aid, and when Gideon had Din dead to rights, Grogu force pushed him, or Bo-Katan jumped in, and ultimately they beat him working together. And at the end, Moff Gideon had nowhere where he could turn, so he just died.
I also want to mention something about Grogu, something that's so great.
I'm sorry, his name is Din Grogu. We should get it right.
I'm not going to say the whole thing every time. But the way he uses the Force throughout this, like he's not giving into the dark side. He's not force choking Gideon, which I thought was a really important thing to note. Like it's showing him firmly on the light side.
He's attempted force choke in the past, but he's been told no, and he's learned that lesson. And God, just how great was it from like to see him as a part of the team, like not blasting folks and stuff, but like protecting Din, moving weapons out of the way, a little force push here. Not a huge game changer, but like right place, right time, little things. And then, of course, the big fire bubble moment is just because nobody else could do that.
Yeah, I mean, now Din is treating him, you know, he obviously loves him and wants to protect him, but he is treating Grogu as a Mandalorian who he knows is capable and has seen do incredible things. So he did not tell him to, you know, go off and hide or, you know, protect yourself, stay safe. You know, he trusted him to accompany him into the heart of the lion's den to try and end Gideon. And I really love that moment where, you know, after Grogu rescues Din at the beginning of the finale, Din looks at him as like, this is never going to end for us unless we take this guy out, because he's the reason that we've been through all this. And we, you know, and it's not, I'm going to take him out. It's, we're going to take him out because you are part of this too. And I feel like that's, that level of trust is one of the things that really helped them ultimately triumph, both with them and with Bo-Katan and with everyone else. I feel like at the end of episode 7, which was titled The Spies, and I think we all kind of misinterpreted that title a little bit. We were all like looking for who's going to be the betrayer, who's going to be the one who stabs the Mandalorians in the back for selfish reasons, and the answer ended up being no one. The Armorer didn't betray them. The Axe Woves didn't betray them. Paz Vizsla, died a hero. He didn't betray them. It ultimately, Mandalorians were stronger together, and they did not break.
Yeah, there was about four different people it could have been. The Armorer was on people's list. Axe Woves was on people's list. The older guy that was sort of leading the refugee Mandalorians.
Yep.
He was one that was suggested.
And can I just say I'm really mad at myself for giving in to all that talk, because my first impulse was that the spies that I wasn't aware of the biblical reference, but but after watching the episode, I took spies to mean because it was the Mandalorians who had gone down to spy out the planet. That was my rationale for what it meant. And obviously it is a biblical reference as well. But everybody had hopped on the spy train, so I couldn't help but I don't think there's a spy, but if I did think there was a spy, it might be this person or this person. And so even I got suckered into that. But I think I will say about the title, it wasn't really making sense to me because they have never done a title for an episode that doesn't pertain to that specific episode. It felt weird that they were titling an episode for something that was going to be revealed maybe the next episode. I thought that would have been a very odd choice, but and I like the fact that ultimately the Mandalorians came together and were united, and it actually made me go back and reevaluate some stuff specifically about the armor. Like as I've done my rewatches, it's like I underestimated her capacity to bend, actually.
Me too.
And so when you go back and you watch those moments and where she's talking about the two different forges and how one was ornate, one was simple, but they both served the same purpose. That's her acknowledging that you have these two different groups of Mandalorians who see things differently, but they ultimately serve the same purpose.
Can I tell you how that felt to me? Or at least the analogy that, because, Star Wars is fantasy, but it's sci-fi fantasy, and it's got elements of both. One of the things that sci-fi does really well is reflect the world we live in through a different lens back to us. It uses a funhouse mirror to some effect to show us, to exaggerate certain things or to obscure certain things so that other details will stand out. To me, this felt like the idea of, okay, carefully, I will tread here. I'm a white man on the internet and I am aware of my privilege. Please forgive me. I mean no disrespect to anyone. But to me, it tasted like some people wanting to wear hijab and some not. And for that to be a perfectly valid choice for a person to want to cover their head or to not cover their head. And for there to be a society where that is not the most important thing about you. The most important thing about you is your adherence to these ideals. For them, it's like we take care of each other. We're honorable. We keep our word. We look out for our adopted and our young, they're focusing on their shared ideals, not what's different between them, at least as the season progresses through the back half here. And the idea that these different people groups can come together to reclaim something and to build a better tomorrow for their people is a story that is very applicable to the world we live in today. the group that saves the world is going to be pretty diverse looking. It almost is by necessity going to have to be. And I like that the Mandalorian has gone, and maybe I'm out of line with what I'm saying about the idea of like wanting to wear a religious headgear, but like it seems pretty 1-to-1 almost.
Yeah,
And-
I don't think you're out of line at all, Stephen.
Mhm.
I mean, perhaps, you know, if someone feels like the 1-to-1 comparison isn't exactly, we'd love to hear that. But I feel like the idea is truly there because, you know, I feel like I'll just say it for myself. I did not trust the armor. You know, when she was saying all these things about, you know, it's time to come together. It's time, you know, to, you know, retake Mandalore, and like she gave Bo-Katan permission to take off their helmet. I'm like, what's your game? Because I thought I did not. This is one of the traps I fell into. I did not think that she was going to be a figure that was capable of change, and part of that stemmed from the fact that, you know, we had this incredibly emotional moment at the end of season 2 where Din removed his helmet so that he could share a moment of connection with his adopted son Grogu. And then when we saw in the book of Boba Fett, he returned to the armor was basically like, that was bad. You've committed an irredeemable sin. You will be forever cast out unless you do this near impossible task. And that really kind of set us up to think that, like, the armor represents an old fixed way that needs to change.
But the armor, the counterpunch to that is the armor is a true believer. So I set you this nigh impossible task. Okay, we did it. Now what? And not only did we do it, but I saw Jesus while I was there, or, you know, mythosaur, whatever. That's a very crude, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I had a deeply religious experience while carrying out this nigh impossible task.
Yeah,
I do think I mean, you're right. She is a true believer, but I think that, and one of the things that I kind of wasn't paying as close attention to is over the course of the season, she is also challenged by the fact that when she says you have to go do this to be redeemed, she's of the opinion that it's impossible. And then, but he's like, he challenges her in being like, but no, it's not impossible. Here, I've got proof. I'll show you, you know, this came from Mandalore. If I go and do this and I bring back proof, then according to the creed, I would be redeemed, which she has to then acknowledge this is the way. And she's also challenged by Bo-Katan, both in terms of she believes that the mythosaur is only a legend. And here before her, you know, the Bo is saying, no, I've actually seen it. And I think that the armor is also witnessing Bo-Katan's acts, like what she's doing, and is having her own perception of the kind of person that Bo-Katan, that she believed Bo was, challenged. Because who isn't going to be won over eventually by Katie Sackhoff?
Even I was won over eventually by Katie Sackhoff.
Yeah.
I hated Starbuck. Hated Starbuck with a fiery passion.
Well, we're not going to talk about that. But it's so great because I think, I'll be honest, there's a couple of different reasons for why I was very judgmental towards the armor in the sense of not believing her capable of that kind of change. One is what Jared mentioned about, you know, what we got like in the book of Boba Fett, and, you know, and her being very stern about, you know, this is what needs to be done. But she also, the way she talks about Bo-Katan and the Kryze family, but she hasn't actually, you know, I presume this is the first time she's actually met Bo-Katan face to face. It certainly seems that way. So she hasn't had that personal, she just knows of Bo-Katan. I think that so she's challenged in her actual experience this season with her. And that moment when they're at the forge in on Navarro, that moment as she's talking about Catan, she has her remove her helmet, and it builds up to that moment where she says, you have walked both worlds. You are the one who can unite us. That is such a powerful moment. And even more powerful when you realize that she wasn't being deceptive. She was being completely honest and truthful. I got chills rewatching that scene today. So yeah, it's just, and I'm not even sure, like, I held on to the belief for a really long time that the armorer was actually Rook Cast, one of Maul's lieutenants from Clone Wars. I have to be honest, I don't believe that to be the case anymore. Especially because even if Bo only had her voice to go off, I feel like they would have been like, hey, you sound familiar. So I've kind of let go of that theory. But I think that might have been one of the factors as well that kept me really on guard about the armor. So I kind of like that I was wrong about the kind of person she is.
Me too, and especially reflecting on the idea of like the idea of wanting to wear the helmet or not being sort of like this divide between people who want to wear a religious head covering in our world or not. I'm really glad they didn't villainize the person that did choose to remain, covered.
Yeah, and this season does, like, now I'm still not personally crazy about the practice, and I don't like the fact that the armor seemed to hold back certain truths to Din and maybe the others about the history of Mandalore. Like early on in season 1, I feel like she kind of told them a selective truth about other Mandalorians and about, so
yeah, her mind changed too.
Yeah, so so that was another thing, but what I really liked about this season was it didn't paint the covert as just like closed-minded individuals. Like, you got to see that these are understanding people who care about each other and care about others, and they're honorable, and they're not Death Watch,
they're not.
And yeah, so I think that was a very important part of this season, and it just opened my eyes in a way that surprised me. So
yeah, me as well, especially because I had to kind of re-examine what the story I thought they were telling, and it feel like it was framed from the perspective kind of that Bo-Katan and some of the other Mandalorians like Axe Woves and Cosca Reeves had, which was they had more than once referred to the Children of the Watch as a cult, and that that's not a good word to be associated with. So I feel like I was kind of conditioned in a way to think that they were upholding a way of life that was a little bit too rigid. And in particular, I didn't like that they were imposing that way on Din because, he had been raised with no other way of knowing that there was another way. And Din actually says as much to Bo-Katan in that great scene in episode 7 where he's like, I never knew your true story. We were taught that you were selfish and uncaring. Now I understand. And I feel like, the story that I was expecting, again, falling into that trap, was that Din would again have a moment where he was forced to choose what it meant to be a Mandalorian to him, because I thought Gideon was going to forcibly take his helmet off when he was captured. And then he would have essentially been a sinner once again, because he would have allowed an enemy to remove his helmet, and he would have to decide whether or not he wanted to do, once again, try to redeem himself in the living waters, or to accept that, I don't need to follow this rule in order to be a Mandalorian. Ultimately, that's not the story we got. And I think the story we ultimately got was that Din is secure in his choice, not because he knows what it means to be a Mandalorian to him. He says as much to Bo-Katan. It's, he's like, the Darksaber, it's maybe this ancient symbol of our people, but I didn't know it had that significance. It really doesn't mean much to me. I just gave it back to you, after you won it. And I feel like what matters more to me is honor and respect and, loyalty. And these are the reasons that I serve you, Lady Bo-Katan. And I found that was the moment where I realized, oh, okay, he actually doesn't need to change in this way. He is walking his true path. And I would love to see Pedro Pascal's face more. This is the first season where we don't see him at all. I do think that it ultimately was a storytelling choice not to have him take his helmet off again, not just an issue of, say, the actor's availability that they had to kind of ride around. And I feel like I've evolved in my understanding of what the show was actually trying to say about the Children of the Watch.
Yeah, and I'll admit I kind of fell into the whole thing because I'll admit, and I've said this elsewhere, like I do have a little bit of trouble in comparison to some other stories, even within Star Wars, of like I struggle sometimes with following a lead character who doesn't show his face, because it's not as easy to empathize with that kind of character, because you want to see an actor who's using the full range of his abilities to deliver a performance. But I think I may have let that get in the way of like what this season was actually telling me about Din, going all the way back to episode 2 when he's at the waters.
Din Djarin or Din Grogu?
Djarin, as we should probably actually be calling him. But
you know what?
But no, I was just going to say, even back in episode 2, like that scene where he steps into the living waters, like Bo-Katan is us right there, where we're kind of scoffing at this. We just want to see Pedro Pascal's face. Can we dispense with all of this? And she's just like glibly reading off, what the plaque says, and then he doesn't care about any of that. He's consumed in his moment of taking the creed and being who he wants to be. And I should have recognized that as an audience member, like, regardless of what I want, like, this is where Din's headspace is at. And I
really love that at the end, everybody was kind of in the shared headspace of, I know how I interact with this ideal. And they're equally convinced that they're interacting with this ideal. And in the end, we really are. Like, it's the dogma that's different, not the real beliefs. Because in the end, they really did believe in the same things. It's nice to see. I would like to bring up a sort of small topic, if we may, and then do the mid-roll.
Okay.
And then do the mid-roll. And then after the mid-roll, I'm going to get up and walk around for a few minutes. My back is still bothering me. I am close to 50, so when you like really hurt your back, it don't get better fast. But yeah, better than I was last week. And holy crap, Tuesday, it was like roll out of bed and crawl to the bathroom. Oof, it was bad. But on the upside, I'm rebounding. Anyway, a while ago, Bloody Ben Blackwood brought up Din Grogu and the idea that, like, is there a reason that he's not Grogu Djarin? Is it perhaps House Din? And if you're adopted by the Mandalorians, as Din Djarin was, you put the house name first instead of last. Is that a thing? So, like, there could be a Bob Din or Boba Din. Let's just go with Boba Din, who found this, foundling, since he was not born a Mandalorian, but an adopted foundling. Then he takes Din Djarin, putting the clan name first to signify that they're adopted. That's the only thing I can think of. But it is odd that he becomes Din Grogu, not Grogu Djarin.
It does seem like there's different like perhaps different rules for different houses. Like it seems like, at least for the Vizsla house, they follow a sort of traditional naming structure.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, yeah, for Jaren of the House of Din, it works differently, and so yeah, for me it just means that it could either be his particular house, or maybe it's something that's done with the foundlings that they take on the given name.
It is not clear, but Bloody Ben Blackwood asked that quite some time ago, and they were very patient waiting for me to bring it up. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. We will see you at Ice and Fire Con.
But I'm sure, like, that's one of those things that I think we, like, even if we don't get context for it in the show, say next season, I feel like there's a visual dictionary or something that will expand upon that idea, because we're always getting that kind of stuff from from Lucasfilm. So
right. You got any thoughts on this, Jared?
Yeah, no, I think that your explanation, Steve, whether or not it ultimately is revealed to be the canonical explanation, makes a lot of sense to me, because we have seen, most of the Mandalorians we have seen have been following in what we think of as the traditional Western structure for names, of the sense of, Lady Bo-Katan Kryze, Satine Kryze, Paz Vizsla, Pre Vizsla, Jango Fett, Boba Fett. But here we have Din Djarin and Din Grogu. In all those previous cases, we knew that there was a biological blood relationship between the groups, that the individuals who were following the name. Whereas in this case, Din is truly the he's taking Grogu on as his son. They are the clan of two, but he is ultimately, they are not bound by blood; they are bound by choice. And in a lot of way, using the structure of having the family name first, I feel like kind of emphasizes that. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad I had a good idea whether or not it turns out to be right or not. And real talk, guilty Undertaker is like, it could just be a peculiar quirk of the world that Din Djarin is from. So, I mean, I always thought his name was Din, like his given. Anyway, ultimately, we don't know. Lucasfilm hasn't made it clear, but Din Grogu it is. And it's, when they named him Grogu, I was like, no way. I'm not calling him Grogu.
Which, by the way, I really did like the sort of full circle in the season, when at the beginning of the season, when I guess I'll start calling him Djarin. When Djarin says his name is Grogu, and then why am I blanking on?
I know that Amy Sedaris' character.
No.
a Grief Karga?
Grief
Karga.
And Grief says, if you say so. And then we get to the end of this season, and he addresses him as Din Grogu. So
yeah,
I did
when I first heard Grogu, I was like, nope. But then within a week, I was like, his name is Grogu, not Baby Yoda. Get it right. He deserves to be called by his name. So yeah, I'm fine with it. It's going to take a little getting used to, but yeah, Din Grogu it is.
Okay, and this is honestly right. Like, if they had gone with Grogu Djarin, it doesn't have the same ring to it that Din Grogu has.
And by the way, can we just throw this back up there for a second? That Blackwood banner, that Blackwood banner, beautiful. So let's do the mid-roll. Mid-roll. This is a YouTube channel, which means you need to like and subscribe if you care about us at all as people. Hit the little thumbs up button. Hit the little subscribe button. I would talk about what we're doing next week, but what we're doing next week is partying in Ohio. I know.
Woo!
It sounds like a weird oxymoron. Party, Ohio, like, but trust me, it's happening.
Oh, I just hope it's not raining for Skelly night, because
there's a good chance it will be, but it is what it is.
Because that was just like I had those.
That was the night
those,
that John ascended to a new plane.
Yeah, those cabin parties really were a new experience for me, where I actually got to party with everybody, and I felt at home doing it. So, but I guess it'll just move to inside. And the worst comes to worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've got to make sure we say thank you to our patrons. Our patrons, we love you guys, including Ridiculous Ed Tollett, our alpha patron, and Lord John Bronstein the Wise, both of whom are great worm patrons. Thank you guys. We really do appreciate it. John Bronstein will be at Ice and FireCon. Also, one of the many. But also got to make sure we thank our Elder Dragon patrons, including the Cloaked One of the Underworld, Ryan Stavka, the Russian Quartermaster, Reflective Rambling, Arch-Maester Emma, Kate, Mistress of the House of Books, Jared Kozal, Doctor of Dragons, Lady Maura Lee of Starfall, and Lady Rita, the Unbound. Thank you, patrons. We love you guys. When we come back, John, the week after, are we just going to talk about Ice and FireCon?
Yep.
Okay. And we'll probably try to have a couple of guests come to join us just to share their experiences as well. Some of the oldies but goodies, people you know and love already because they've been on the channel before. Not Jared.
No, that just makes me excited, because that is for me part of the ritual of continuing on the Ice and FireCon experience, so that the Sunday after we get back, we can all just envelop each other in that Ice and FireCon love.
Yeah, we'll all be in deep withdrawals to get a little taste of it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, and who knows what's after that? I really want people to watch the Dungeons and Dragons movie because I want to talk about that. It's really fun and good time. And anyway, so yeah, go watch the D&D movie. But it'll be a while before we are able to talk about it.
And
what else do we need to set in the mid-roll? Oh yeah, we have a Slack group where if you want to it's basically like Discord, but it's Slack. And if you want to join, all I need you to do is send me an email to the email address that I'm about. This one right here, we3dragons@gmail.com. We3 spelled out dragons@gmail.com. And I will invite you to our Slack group, and you can be part of the ongoing madness that is our Slack group. What was it yesterday? Somebody posted a meme in the general chat that was like, oh yeah, take any song lyric with the word girl in it and replace it with the word squirrel. And there were some really great song lyrics in the chat yesterday. I wish that I had Jesse's squirrel.
I just want to make sure before we get back to the conversation that I just announced, hey, John Webster Film is back. So if any of you guys missed my stream yesterday, which was about the third season of Star Trek Picard, and I did it with AK and our good friend Dan. We had a great time just geeking out about that. Seriously, Steve, I don't care how you felt about seasons 1 and 2. You're going to want to watch this.
Yeah, that's what I hear. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. So yeah, go ahead and catch that if you missed it. And then obviously I'll be off next weekend because, as we mentioned, we'll be at Ice and FireCon. But the Saturday after that, at 7 p.m., I'll be having and this guy, as well as Trish on Blue Lemons, excuse me, on that, I believe it's on May 6th. May 6th, 7 p.m. to talk about the movie The Batman from last year. So tune in for that. All right, I'm done.
Okay, there was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, I'm a professional dungeon master. Hire me, please. I need the work.
Do it.
Please. Seriously. Tell your D&D friends. I'm really good. I have lots of references. I also have all the online tools I need to play with anybody anywhere in the world, provided they can reach, I can't play with somebody in North Korea. So yeah, but I've got all the stuff you need. Hire me. I'm great at it. I've been doing it over 30 years, and I'll play the game you want. Also, God dang it, I know there was something else, and I've lost track of it in the meanders. I am, however, John, I'm going to just turn it back over to you to continue the conversation. I've got to get up and walk around because I'm hurting. Been sitting here for over an hour. Got to get up and move around my back, but I'll be back. But yeah, take it away, guys. And if I remember this random thing that I wanted to talk about, I'll just come back and talk about it.
All right. Okay, so there's something we haven't talked about that I know got us both excited. We had a certain guest appearance in episode 5, didn't we?
Oh, I came back. Yes, it was amazing.
He looked good. He looked good.
He looked amazing. He looked great.
Yeah, I've been I think I mentioned this on the last stream. One of my pet theories, such as it was that we would get an appearance by a Rebels character this season. I was convinced it was going to be Sabine because I thought it just makes sense. She is, a Mandalorian. There's a natural connection there. I know they've cast the actress. And then I knew that, I had heard that, Hera would be in Ahsoka. I knew, Rom was there. We've already seen Chopper in live action. We've gotten a voice cameo from Kanan in The Rise of Skywalker. But I did not think we were getting Zeb. Zeb was the last person I thought we would see. But it worked, There he was, just hanging out.
He looked fantastic, and I was just so overjoyed because I've been a little cranky about the recasting of actors and the fact that we don't have Ashley for Ahsoka, and and most of the Rebels cast is getting new actors, but we got Steve Bloom for Zeb, and that means a lot.
It does, and to be perfectly honest, I understand there are reasons for the live action recast. I'm happy when the original actor does come back, like Bo-Katan with Katie Sackhoff, and now, as we can confirm, Lars Mikkelsen for Thrawn, which I'm super hyped about.
Yeah.
But for the characters that, are more of a CGI/prosthetic creation where, the voice actor is able to reprise the role, it made total sense to get Stephen Bloom back, just like it made sense to get Corey Burton back for Cad Bane in the Book of Boba Fett. And so I'm very glad that they did it, because when he walked onto the screen, I'm like, that's Zeb. I suppose it could be another Lasap, and I'm like, that's Zeb.
Well, it was so funny because he was the last person I was expecting, because I was like, they're probably not even going to do him for Ahsoka because he'd be too difficult to pull off or whatever. So they'll just say he's off somewhere doing something. And so I certainly was not expecting him in the random episode of The Mandalorian. And so I didn't even pay attention to visually to him. I was so focused on what's the other
Carson Teva.
Carson, yeah. I was so focused on him, and there's just this random voice in the background and going, I really thought Navarro was going to make it, and it took about 2 or 3 seconds, and I was like, that sounds familiar. And then the camera cuts to him. I'm like, oh my God, it's Zeb. It was just so great. I loved it.
Yeah. And what was brilliant about it was like if you have not seen Rebels, you didn't need to know that was Zeb for the scene to work.
Yeah.
He was just, he's a cool looking alien pilot who's happened to hang out with good old gumshoe Carson Teva. And but for those of us who do, this is how like the larger connected story of the galaxy works, Boyer, because you're like, we followed that guy for 4 whole seasons. And who knows, maybe he's got more storytelling in him. I don't know if he'll show up in Ahsoka. I agree he's the one who hasn't been confirmed for that show. But now that he's propped up in the Mandalorian, I actually do think we'll probably see him. He may not play the major role, but he may swing by, see his old friends.
And also, like, on the topic of like the recastings and stuff and growing comfortable with that, I actually also think that it's like, and I don't know if this was necessarily in their thinking behind it, but it's important to me, aside from Ahsoka, who was not really part of the main Rebels cast. I think it's really neat that the first like main Rebels character that we get on screen was the original actor who played him. So it's actually a nice segue to bringing those characters into animation. As the first one we really get is Steve Bloom as Zeb, and then now my heart is open to welcome the other actors and as those characters. So
now we just need confirmation Dave Filoni's voicing Chopper. I think that he will be.
Yeah, I think so. Which, by the way, like, I know we're not talking about the Ahsoka trailer, but I seriously think that one of my most joyful moments is just seeing Chopper going wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, no, the number one. I mean, I thought that Ahsoka trailer looked incredible. I'm obviously very hyped for Thrawn. I love the look of the new characters, but what it really told me was like, because I've been meaning to do this forever, was like I gotta make time to rewatch Rebels before this show comes out. It's honestly been a couple years. I've rewatched Clone Wars 4 or 5 times. I've rewatched The Bad Batch a couple times. I have only sat through Rebels fully, like end to end, once. I have revisited my favorite episodes many times, but I'm looking forward to going through the whole thing again. And I think I've got a couple months to do it, so I think.
Yeah, and again, we need to be careful. I don't want to veer over into Ahsoka talk, but I just want to say, like, because this wouldn't be a stream with me on it if I didn't mention music. But I'm just so happy that Kevin Kiner is coming to do the music for Ahsoka, because like he owns like the musical landscape of those characters. So
yeah, it's well deserved. It's the right man for the right job.
Yeah. So, and speaking of which, I brought up Zeb, and we haven't really talked much about episode 5. Naturally, we wanted to plunge right into talking about the epic finale, but I don't know. I enjoyed episode 5. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of Gorian Shard.
How dare you?
But yeah, I know. but like, especially on rewatches, like, it's a great sort of standalone episode. I mean, okay, the whole pirate element is introduced in the first episode, but it does really kind of feel like this, it's like a big battle episode that has a lot of fun stuff. And especially when I did my rewatch of all of these episodes, I wanted to get very theatrical about it. So I actually watched them on my 65-inch 4K TV and set up a chair like a bit closer than I would normally sit, but to get sort of that theater experience. And and all the action scenes in this episode in particular just looked great, with the Mandalorians dropping down and fighting in the streets and stuff. So I just thought it was a really well executed episode.
Yeah, no, I really thought that it was an awesome like sequence of action that ultimately like really prepared us for what we were going to get in the finale of like just how capable the Mandalorians are as a fighting force. You know, I can't tell you how many times we've seen them drop out of gunships in the Clone Wars. Seeing them do it in the live action was thrilling. I loved that they, you know, how they kind of took the pirates by surprise, and there was that great moment with Bane where, you know, Din is pursuing him in the end one. They're like, he's above you.
He's above you.
He's below you. And yeah, and then the beat where they finally, you know, they managed to get dear old Gorian Shard on the ropes, and Bane is like, bye-bye, I'm peacing out of here. I'm probably heading to Skeleton Crew. And then Gorian, you know, goes down with the ship. I will say that, you know, if I do not think Moff Gideon survived, I do not want him to have survived. I'm okay if Gorian Shard crawled out of that wreck. I wouldn't mind seeing it.
I don't think he did.
I don't think he did, but I have an affection for something that's for characters that are just so over the top weird that you just can't believe you're seeing them on screen. And Gorian kind of took that point. He crossed that line, and then he crossed so far that he crossed back over into my heart.
Yeah, I'm still not sure how I feel about it, because it was like, and I know you were very excited about this, like when the season started off, because, you know, I know you're very defensive about the more pulp aspect, or not defensive. What's the word I'm looking for?
Celebratory.
Not even that. You're protective of the pulp aspect of Star Wars. So coming off of Andor, you were like, that's right, Gorian Shard and Luthen Rail exist in the same universe, and I'm sitting here going, do they really? It doesn't feel like they do. But yeah, no, I don't know. He worked for the episode, and I did like sort of the old school approach with his character. Like, his lip movements don't even always match the dialogue, and it's something that just felt so wonderfully retro about that.
Yeah, no, he is truly a character, and all kidding aside, I do think he's gone. But yeah. I will say that I appreciated that, you know, they committed to the bit with him, and, you know, now that he is, you know, little extra crispy on the side, I think that, you know, I'm ready to see what they cook up next.
Jess is starting a war with Steven.
Yeah. You know what? There are days when I feel
I do want
to crazy.
I do want to say, and you know, Steven's not here to defend himself, but he'll be back. But he said, like, the stuff we get in the finale with, like, the Mandalorians, you know, fighting in the air with the jetpacks and stuff is unlike anything we've done in Star Wars. I'm going to challenge him on that, because we have gotten that in Star Wars animation and that kind of stuff. And that's why it was so exciting to see that kind of thing, because this finally felt like a Mandalorian storyline, and with the epic scale and the kind of sequences that would have felt right at home in animation and Clone Wars, which has always been something that I kind of, and maybe it was just this, maybe a bit of last season, and then this season I was like, yeah, but if this show was animated, think of all the stuff they could do. But this finale felt like it was perfectly at home with the storytelling we got for Mandalore, like in Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, and I mean, and then part of it is we kind of had to earn this, you know, like with animation, you know, one of the appeals of it is that because you're not actually having to recreate these things using special effects and actors in costumes, you know, the sky is the limit as to what you can show, really. And with the Mandalorian, as incredibly well produced as it has been, it does not have the budget of a live action movie, especially in the season 1. So this was not something that they could do. I mean, like I remember the big fake climactic face off at the end of season 1 where, they're facing down Moff Gideon, and it's incredibly well done for the budget that the show had at the time, but they couldn't have done something like this. This is something that the show had to earn by being such a massive success for 3 seasons. It earned that larger budget, and they got to play with it. This is something that would not have looked out of place on the big screen on a live action movie. And
which is why, like, I even the first time that I watched the finale, I did the same thing with my viewing of watching it on my big screen TV with, seeing it up close. And what I did was I rewatched the penultimate episode and then went right into the finale, because I was like, this is clear like a big movie event for the end of the season. And I can't see it on a theater screen, but I can try to approximate it at home. And I was so glad I did that, because, man, the scale of it is just amazing.
Yeah, no, when Bo-Katan pulls out the Darksaber and starts leading the airborne Mandalorian charge, I'm like, I can't believe I'm watching this.
Well, and then the armor's beside her, and she takes out her weapons in the air, and she's smacking people left and right. It's so good.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm back. I went and did some stretches, walked around. But yeah, since we're back to talking about this bit, I agree. Like, it's the most thrilling action scene, at least. I mean, I don't know. There have been space battles that have been pretty epic in Star Wars, but like ground battle, I loved it. And actually, speaking of, I would like to go back to episode 5 for a moment. You guys talked a little bit about it. And one of the things that I really enjoyed that they did in episode 5 was they had the Mandalorians use cover, tactical movement, overlapping fields of fire. They understood where their choke points were. Like, and John, you've heard me talk about this 100 times in anything of Star Wars we ever do. I really appreciated that they made them have a tactical mindset. And when they made we'll say tactical error, I could understand why they made said error. Like when they got caught in a crossfire, they were drawn in. They were outflanked. It happens, but like they were fighting very smart, which they should do. And it was happening in the air fight too, to a lesser extent. There's not a whole lot of cover, but still, like the idea that the Mandalorians are more comfortable fighting in 3 dimensions than the dark troopers that they're facing would be, because they spend so much of their time training. Even from being a child, we see a child zoom off in a jetpack during training in episode 4, maybe. But yeah, I really appreciated the fact that they made the Mandalorians feel like soldiers who knew what they were doing. You have to expose yourself sometimes, but they did it minimally. They covered each other. It's not like, that was one of the things I noticed. It's not like everybody got up and moved at once. No, some people stayed in place while people moved forward and they were covering. I just really appreciated the attention to detail there. Because the clone troopers and stormtroopers, just, they never did that. But another thought I had while watching the finale, the big infantry fight in the finale, was, if you'll forgive me, I'm a big fan of Warhammer 40,000, and there is talk of developing a television show. And I'm like, this is what Space Marine power armor combat should look and feel like in that show. This is some of the best action for like armored infantry combat I've seen anywhere, in anything. Tell me something that's better.
Honestly, I haven't. It's nothing's coming to mind. I mean, I haven't watched like the Halo series that they had. I don't know what
It was
people thought about that.
okay.
Yeah, but I I appreciated that they used the stunt performers in such a way that it really felt like they were actually going at it, in airborne space combat. Now, I don't know if they were on wires. I don't know if they were using what kind of techniques they were using, but it felt like real actors, engaged in a battle as opposed to, CGI creations flying at each other. I'm sure there was some background special effects, but it felt very hard hitting. You felt it when the armorer took her hammer and crushed that jet trooper's skull.
Yeah, and like nothing stood out like that kind of stuff you would normally expect to like really see the seams of visual effects of we've all seen like shots when it is an actual actor on wires in the air. It's like they clearly look superimposed over a background or something, and I don't know like what they were utilizing. If I mean maybe it was just they shot on wires, but it was against the volume, so that's wireless versus like green screening and uh, and stuff like that. But just it looked so damn good that I was like, yeah, this feels like an epic Mandalorian battle that I would have seen in Clone Wars, but live action, and it just sucked me in. And yeah, it was so good. And talking again, I mentioned like when the armor comes in next to Bo-Katan when they're flying through. I love the moment before that when right before the battle starts and you hear the armor go, "Your reinforcements have arrived, Lady Kryze," and it's just like, and that was when like I knew like, oh, so I didn't have to worry about the armor. She's like, she's here on our side. She's in the fight, and
It was so great too. Like because I was convinced there was a second spy. It is what it is. I wasn't sure if it was going to be Axe or the armor, but when it turned out to be neither, I was very pleasantly surprised. But the thing is, I think they knew we were going to suspect that because they played it very much like either one of them could have turned until like the armorer shows up and she's flying alongside and she's smashing skulls and I'm like, well, it ain't going to be her. And then I was like, I guess it's Axe then. But then he starts fighting, and I'm like, well, okay, we cut away. Okay, there's going to be something. There's going to be something. And it wasn't. And I really am glad that it was not.
And here's the thing. I had been wishing that we had gotten more with Axe, like, prior to, like, these episodes. Like, I talked about how I wish episode 6 had, like, maybe spent time with the privateers and we would have gotten more character development for Axe. But you know what? God damn it. Through the course of like what we got through this finale and the fact that he survives and like, I am so all in on his character. I love that guy. He's definitely got his rough edges for sure, but like, and this felt like such an homage to Clone Wars, especially to like, it felt very pre-Vizsla, but in a good way. When after they've won and they're all at the Great Forge and they get lit up and he screams out "For Mandalore" and they all chant "For Mandalore." That just really harkened back to the older days of Mandalore and got me so excited. So I love his character now just because, like he's a loyal Mandalorian, whatever you want to think maybe of his personality.
One thing I want to take away is that Din is extremely talented close quarters fighter. And there's been a little bit of talk about Mandalorians not being as much melee fighters, at least not the way they're portrayed a lot in the show. And maybe Din isn't as much a melee fighter, but he's very talented close quarters fighter to the point that I want to name an entire move after him. The Din maneuver is when you shoot the guy in the foot first, or you go for the foot shot and then the killing blow, because he does that at least 3 times in the finale episode. And it's a very effective maneuver because that ankle has to be one of the few places that you can't really armor very well with Beskar. It has to be flexible and not a big chunk of metal in the way to resist, to impede your mobility. So the fact that like he'll go for somebody's ankle, be it with the stun baton, he does it one time, and then when he's fighting the Praetorian Guard, he does it twice. It's a slick maneuver on his part because it's one of the few places that you can't armor up very well, and it definitely puts them out of. You can't stand, you can't fight, right? You get shot in the foot, you're not going to keep fighting. You're going to go, oh, my foot, and then he's going to shoot under your helmet and finish you off that way.
Yeah. And he's versatile. Like we've talked a lot about the big sequence with the jetpack troopers, but another fantastic action sequence in the finale was Din essentially fighting his way through the energy shield hallways and starting out with no weapons. And he has to take the weapons from the troopers, and then he takes the shield, and then he takes the blaster, and he essentially it was a very video game sequence, but like in a good way.
Yeah. Well, again, like the best media, the best stories are gonna like do what their medium does well. They're going to try to do that as well as they possibly can. And you saying it feels like a video game scene, as you say, it's not a bad thing because the overlap between television and video games is sort of like the audio-visual component. You don't have agency in a television show the same way you do in a video game, but there is still a whole lot of overlap there. So an action show feeling like an action video game scene is not a bad thing at all, in my opinion. And like it felt like an anime at times. It felt like a video game at times. It felt like John Wick moments. Din really leveled up again. His close combat skill, the hallway fight scene. I mean, who didn't flash back to Phantom Menace just a little bit?
Yeah, I will say that I was cracking up when I think it's the first one he goes through where he's fighting and he's knocking the guys off the side and he goes to reach for the weapon, but the guy falls over too quickly and he misses the weapon. So it's like, damn it. Yeah, and I also want to mention as far as like fight scenes at the end, just like I loved the stuff with Grogu when he's isolated with the Praetorian Guard and like it's funny because he really gets to shine when he's out of the the IG suit because it's great because we're getting like stuff that we kind of saw in Attack of the Clones with Yoda, except it's a real puppet.
Or stuff we saw him doing in Book of Boba Fett while he was training with Luke, hopping stones and stuff,
Yeah.
But I loved it. It was great. And then, I talked about this before, but just the way he uses the Force to help with, with Din in the fight and stuff where he's helping him by getting like the weapons out of the way and like putting the guards at a disadvantage. And then he does the same thing with Gideon as well.
Yeah, he's using the Force like a Jedi. He like back when he was a little younger and a little bit less mature. He did have that moment where he tried to Force choke like Cara Dune, just because he didn't understand like how to really engage his power, and he lashed out with anger. But now he had I know that some wanted to see more from him training with Luke, but I feel like what we did get, like we see the lessons are paying off. He is he may not be like the fully trained Jedi that he could have been if he'd stayed with Luke, but those lessons were imparted to him, and he is going to make them part of who he is going forward and becoming Mandalorian and Jedi, even if now the Mandalorian part of his identity seems to be the one that he will identify most closely with going forward.
They're not mutually exclusive. And honestly, I think they're setting up. I mean, obviously, Jedi is still a thing, sort of, in that period in the timeline. You know, Luke is out there doing his thing, trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. And at some point, the Jedi won't be a thing anymore. Canonically, it's not a thing, as at the end of Episode 9, film Episode 9. What is that called? Rise of Skywalker. Yeah. Right. So, Jedi don't exist anymore, canonically, at that point.
Well, at the announcement of Celebration, we know that Rey will be building a new Jedi Order. But, yeah, I take your point that, what it is evolved at that point, you know. It is going to be the new Jedi Order.
Yeah, but it will also not be the Jedi Order. It won't be just a rebirth of the exact same thing. It will probably by necessity have somewhat different ideals driving it, somewhat different dogmas driving it.
I agree.
So Jedi's just not a thing, which is probably for the good because what Jedi was and
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, just because the Jedi will be changing, that doesn't mean the Jedi don't exist. Rey is a Jedi.
No, she's not.
Yeah, she is.
No,
yeah, she is.
This is a conversation for another time.
Luke even says, "And I will not be the last Jedi."
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Rey is a Jedi.
I disagree. I don't think she needs to be either. I think to call her a Jedi is to limit her, honestly.
Well, they even introduced her at Celebration as a Jedi Master who's starting a new Jedi Order. So
okay,
she's a Jedi.
You know what? That I did not see that. So yeah, I did not watch all those trailers and stuff. I'm trying to stay a little bit unspoiled.
But, it wasn't a trailer. They just announced it on stage.
But I feel like to say she's a Jedi is to limit her. When they start calling her a Jedi and I hear it, I'll agree. But right now,
I don't feel that's limiting at all because it expands on the idea of what a Jedi can be. But
okay, you know what? This is a philosophical debate for a whole other stream. What is Jedi? You want to join us for that one, Jared?
I would love to.
I bet you would. I bet you would.
It's a question I spend many hours thinking about. But to bring it back to kind of Grogu, I do feel that his identity, as you kind of alluded to, it has evolved. He is, he does not have to be either a Mandalorian or a Jedi. He can be both. And he represents something new that, we don't know ultimately where his path leads him. But I think that moment in the finale when he fully adopts the creed or Din, agrees that he is his biological son, and Grogu, you see him kind of stare down into the living waters, and we go down and we see the mythosaur again. There is that kind of connection that we are thinking, when in Book of Boba Fett, the armor talked about the mythosaur rising up to herald a new age of Mandalore. We didn't really know who they were talking about. Was it going to be Din? Was it going to be Bo-Katan? Could it be Grogu? I think it may ultimately be something a little bit more a little bit more spiritual and a little bit less, physical than we originally imagined. Although if they want to have Grogu ride a mythosaur, I'm not going to say no to that.
Yeah, and the thing is, The Mandalorian is the show for that to happen in. It really is. Yeah. It's Andor is not, but that it's set up for this story. We got about 10 minutes left before I'm going to have to shut it down for me to go. I can only, you guys can continue talking if you want, but I'm going to be done in 10 minutes. That being said, do we want to look forward to a season 4 or to Ahsoka or think about what might be next for these characters at all? or talk about something from the season that didn't get wrapped up, because there's a few things, including the like Imperial spies, who I think will play into Ahsoka, as well as like 3 baby pterodactyl monsters that will at some point will grow up. They're those are Chekhov's pterodactyls right now.
Yeah.
Who also seemingly have their own cloaking devices, because I don't recall seeing them at any other point in the rest of the season.
Yeah.
But that's all right.
Yeah, I feel like there are a couple tracks where we could look forward, in the sense that I mentioned how like they kind of tied up a lot of things in a neat little bow for Din and Grogu, and for the Mandalorians reclaiming their homeworld. But one thing that we haven't touched on is at the end, Din goes to Carson Teva, and he basically offers himself as a kind of independent contractor to help hunt down the remaining Imperial remnants who are causing trouble in the Outer Rim. And I don't know for sure, but I kind of feel like this is them taking what was going to be that Rangers of the New Republic show and kind of folding it back into the Mandalorian as part of the season 4 storytelling that we're going to get going forward. And I do feel that ultimately that thread is going to connect with what we see in Ahsoka, with the return of Thrawn and his faction of the Imperial Remnant. And I kind of feel like that's where we're going to get the culmination that is in that movie that was announced at Celebration, Dave Filoni directing a kind of climactic event film tying together all the stories in this area, from Ahsoka to the Mandalorian to the Book of Boba Fett to Skeleton Crew. And after seeing the way that they've kind of reset the board, I feel like Din and Grogu will be playing a key role in that process, in a way that kind of they've said it's not an Avengers style team up, and I agree that's probably not the structure of the story. But I do think we are going to have all these threads from all these shows come together in one big climactic confrontation that will be the forces of the New Republic, and that we've seen in the Mandalorians perhaps, taking on a revitalized Imperial remnant that will be headed by Grand Admiral.
But I think they've also been cautious to be like, they say it's going to come, like the film will be a climactic event, but I wouldn't necessarily look to it to be like the end point for all these like Mandoverse shows. I don't think it will necessarily resolve everything. I'm just like cautioning people to, as our friends at Force Center like to say, speculate responsibly and don't go expecting something that we might not get. So we've got a while to wait until that movie materializes. So I don't want to go forming ideas about what it might or might not be this far in advance, because
Why not? It's fun to speculate wildly.
that can only lead to
It's
disappointment.
going to be Luke Skywalker and Force Ghost Yoda and Grogu.
Yeah.
Riding a mythosaur. Okay. One of the things I really am looking forward to is seeing how, because like the idea of the show is called The Mandalorian, and from episode 1, season 1, Din Djarin was the Mandalorian. And then we got into season 2, and our definition of, by the end of season 2, we're like, well, Boba Fett's kind of like the Mandalorian that we first knew, even though he's not Mandalorian, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. But, like, he's kind of that guy. And then in season 3, arguably, the Mandalorian is Bo-Katan this season. And the way they kind of put a bow on the Din, Djarin, and Grogu story makes me feel like maybe they won't have as big a part to play in season 4. It's a possibility.
That's interesting, because I actually had the complete opposite reaction.
That's why I brought it up, because, I know you did.
Yeah, where I feel like the end of the season actually sets up for, if they wanted to, for season 4 to potentially be very focused on Din Djarin and Grogu, in a way that's maybe a bit more smaller scale, just following them as they, you know, go on these missions, for the New Republic. But I suspect it probably won't be that simple, because I don't know that they'll just leave the Mandalore, storyline. I feel like some of that is still going to come into play, but I actually think season 4 has an opportunity to be more focused on Din and Grogu than.
I mean, it can be,
yeah.
but like it just depends on which way they go, because they also have the option of letting them just sit at home for a while the other Mandalorians go about doing things, whatever it is they are doing. I doubt I'm not ready to put money on this bet by any means, but like the thought has definitely occurred to me that the way they left the season, it felt like they could just stay there until they're needed for the story. The thing being, we don't have any idea what season 4 story will actually be. Also, though, my actual biggest complaint about the back half of the season, and it's tongue in cheek, but it's also a little bit legitimate, was no more Ahmed Best? Question mark.
That has to come back in season.
Yeah,
it has to.
Yeah, we're not done with that.
No.
It's I would put down a very confident bet for season 4 that we're getting more of that flashback.
I mean, I loved having him there for what we had of him, which obviously they're going to continue that. Well, I say that. I really hope they continue that, and if they do, obviously that means more Grogu in the story. And I'm not suggesting that they would be cut out entirely, but I think it is a possibility that it might not really be their story, because Din Djarin really isn't the Mandalorian anymore.
No, he's. I kind of. I don't know. I kind of object to this
Okay.
whole thing of, because
Noted.
I think that the end of this season kind of drives home that they were caught up in a bigger story this year, and it was an ensemble, cast, versus earlier, like especially back in season 1. But I think the way this season ends makes it clear to me that the title character is still Din Djarin, and
Exactly made me laugh at this one.
I think honestly that most of that conversation of he's not the Mandalorian anymore was driven by people who just couldn't stand to see him sharing the spotlight with somebody.
I'm one of the people that said that, and it certainly ain't my point of view.
No, and that's why I didn't say all.
Okay.
Okay.
Hashtag not all men. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So no, to my mind, like the title still refers to to.
I mean, in general, yes, but like I think that the idea that the title has expanded and the show has continued to expand to encompass more and more Mandalorians, like you say, this season it felt like an ensemble cast. I feel like it's been expanding its scope the whole time, and so to go into season 4 with an even further expanded scope seems like a natural progression to me. Obviously, it doesn't have to be one way or the other, and you know what? They've won enough good faith from me that, despite the fact that I didn't love episode 3 and I didn't love episode 6 this season, like the rest of it, obviously I enjoyed a lot. So, yeah, they've got a lot of good faith for me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's fine. I still like to speculate,
I will say I'm kind of and it's fine. You feel the way you feel. I'm still a little bummed that you haven't come around on episode 3, because I just still, it's one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. I thought they did such a great job on that, but I get that it doesn't work for everybody.
like, it's not that it does or doesn't work. It's just, again, it's always about like just your from a certain point of view, which is a very Star Wars thing to say. I've got a bad feeling about this,
and especially because I think that speaking of episode 3, and then we see her again in episode 7.
Elia Kane, yeah,
Elia
she's
Kane.
She's coming back.
Guys, I'm getting so bad with names when I'm like doing my streams. I don't know.
I've never really caught the name of the character, but I know who but when you say Elia Kane, I'm like, yes. The former Imperial communications officer whose biceps are bigger than my thighs.
Putting aside the obvious, the biceps are wonderful. They really are. But
they are in fact quite nice. Yes.
But aside from that, I have really been intrigued by her character this season, and I'm looking forward to, especially now that she won't be reporting to Gideon anymore. I'm interested to see where her character goes, and especially because she's now like, even though she's total fascist, all in on the Empire stuff. So it's not like she's not really sympathetic in that way.
Great character.
But in the same kind of way where, like in Andor, where Dedra is interesting, while still being an absolutely horrible person, I kind of feel like I've gotten a bit of that with Elia Kane as well, where I'm just intrigued to see where her character goes and how she factors into things. So I think they've crafted a really great character. And I was actually initially surprised that we didn't find out what actually became of Dr. Pershing. But now
I'm sure that question will be answered eventually.
Yeah, but I'm also feeling now like that episode 3 was really more about setting up her character to be a major player going forward, because we got to know, like, I mean, not know a whole lot about her backstory and stuff, but we got to really have a feel for her character and see her like sort of being a bit sympathetic, where we're invited to like her in moments, while of course in the back of our head being like, no, she's probably up to no good. and then and then the end of that episode we get, it's the Get Out moment, like Allison Williams in Get Out, when she's having the Cocoa Puffs or whatever. And at the end of this episode, she's biting down on the cookie. It's like, man, evil women who, chew their food and,
yeah,
in scary ways. It's like, give me that. Give me more of that.
The actress whose name I'm not sure of off the top of my head.
For this actor, Katie O'Brien.
Yes, Katie O'Brien. I know that she is a lesbian, so means I have, unfortunately, zero shot with you. But please understand that I am appreciating you from afar. Not too close. Within arm's reach of her is quite dangerous place to be if you're, But I really like her character. I like her portrayal. God, she's a commanding presence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think they're obviously setting her up to, I'd be shocked if she didn't play a bigger role in, in stories to come, whether it's just this series or whether, she then pops up in those shows, which is great. And, and it's kind of great. I mentioned this last time, kind of great that we got to throw a transphobe out and get it, a really kick-ass, inspiring, lesbian actress to,
Yeah, I do find a certain level of attractiveness in a woman that I'm absolutely certain can beat me in arm wrestling. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's attractive to me. Um, the I'm pretty much straight, but the men that I'm attracted to are big, strong types too. Um, it is what it is. I like it. And she's got it. She's got it. I'm not trying to objectify too much, but she's a lovely lady. But I really appreciate the like the character and the fact that she's got pathos to the character, which it's hard to make me to feel some kind of way like about a space Nazi.
Yeah, and I think it's all the more impressive because, and this is, I'm not taking a shot at this series or its writing or anything like that, but in its intent, this show is not Andor, so it's not looking to give us the sort of complexity of morally gray characters like that show is. I think Mandalorian is, if this season taught me anything, it's much more of a straightforward story. So I'm all the more intrigued by and a lot of people said that episode 3 was kind of like the most Andor like of,
it just felt like a different show to me. I didn't love it because I was confused by its tone.
Yeah,
we discussed that already.
But what I love is that we did get a character who feels like, she's, a member of the Empire. And so she's not sympathetic in that way, but the performance and the character is interesting. So I like that we're set up to now be interested in this character who's on the other side.
The same way that Andor made us interested in a couple of Imperials.
Yeah, I think these stories are more interesting, not by making it's not a like both sides thing of like the Empire is never going to be sympathetic in that way, but it's really nice to get interesting characters, from the villains as opposed to just having all the underlings being like, just disposable, stormtroopers or whatever.
Okay, there's that old adage that like the best villains are the ones who believe they're the heroes in their own story, and we don't know why she believes in the Empire, but she clearly does. She doesn't strike me as someone who is just doing this because she is twirling her non-existent mustache. She is committed to the cause. She believes what she is doing is right, and we may not find out why exactly she feels that way, but it's enough for me to know that she believes it. And that makes her dangerous and capable. And it means that because she's still there on Coruscant at the heart of the New Republic government, that makes her a threat. And I have a feeling that she will ultimately, when this greater conflict arrives, whatever form it may take, she will be well positioned to strike a definitive blow for her side.
Yep.
Oh, Tom Tell Fandom is saying that Moff Gideon is dead and his weird doctor got tortured and permanently damaged by his thug. I'm not convinced that she's his thug anymore. She might be working for one of the other Shadow Council people or even directly for Thrawn. Even if she was working for Moff Gideon before, she may have been a Thrawn plant at that point. We just don't know. And they're clearly positioning her to be more important. So yeah, she might pop up in Ahsoka. She might pop up in season 4 of Mandalorian. Maybe both.
How are you feeling about if she goes to serve Thrawn, she might run into a cast member who you're familiar with, Stephen, because apparently cast says, Thrawn's number 2, for lack of a character name, is going to be Mr. Wes Chatham from the Expanse.
Yes, I heard. Amos in Star Wars.
So, yeah.
Speaking of big, strong, attractive men, yeah.
yeah, so we should probably wrap up because we're 10
Yeah,
minutes.
I'm really feeling it again, like yeah. Sitting here is not the easiest thing to do, but I wanted to come back and ride out the end of the storm with you guys. So yeah, Jared, thanks for joining us, man. I know it's like Star Wars, twist your arm, and I know you're about to go back to studying for some kind of medical exam, like you're a doctor and you got a thing. So we won't keep you too late, but thanks so much for joining us, man. Your insights are always very interesting, and you are one of those people that like you're deep enough in the fandom that it's all right there. It's all right there. It's all right there. The names and like just it's always good to have the perspective of smart people. So thanks for coming and joining us and making me and John look smarter than we actually are with your astute observations. And John, every week, man, thanks for being here, bro.
Wait, I want to clear something up for a second. I pay Jared and I give him a script. So really the whole smart thing that you just said.
It's you.
Yeah.
But like, John, you're not supposed to say that. Don't worry. We'll fix it in post.
Yeah. Yeah, that my rates may have just gone up after that. Yeah. But in all seriousness, thank you both for always for having me on. It's always a privilege to talk any one of the fantasy stories we love, but in particular Star Wars with two people who I know are as smart and thoughtful as you, and I look forward to the next time we get to do it, whenever that may be.
Yep. Well, it'll be soon, I'm sure. I already like the idea of like, what the heck is a Jedi? And also, trust me, we can turn that into a 3-hour conversation, 2 hours at least.
And also, pretty soon we're going to have Star Wars Visions coming back as well, May 4th.
Yeah. Oh, nice! What a great day, May the 4th. Yeah. But yeah, so next week we will have no stream, unfortunately. It's Ice and Fire Con weekend. If you're there, come say hi to me. Ask my permission for a hug and I will give you one. Please don't hug me without my permission. Unless you're John. Then you're allowed to sneak up on me.
Or Katie O'Brien.
No, Katie O'Brien, you know what? Katie O'Brien, West Chatham, you can hug me. You have my consent right now. From now until the end of time. Actually, you know what? There's a whole lot of people that could go on that list. Everybody, you should ask me first, but I'm generally going to say yes. You should generally ask anybody if it's okay to give them a hug. But yeah, we will not see you next week, but we'll see you 2 weeks after that, where John and I will be basking in our afterglow of seeing each other for a weekend. But
I just want to say, and I really can't wait, man. It's been a long year since the last time we were all together at Ice and Fire Con, so I just can't wait.
Yeah, it's been a year, man. It's been a whole year. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But until then, you guys take care of each other, because that's how we do around here. And you know what it is. Peace. And be excellent to each other. Yeah, I know, right? This one, John. Not this one. That was your channel last night. Oh yeah. No John Webster film stream this coming weekend either. But the weekend after that, there's something, right?
It'll be the Batman with Jared and Blue Lemons. So make sure you guys tune in for that. Sweet.
So we'll see y'all over there, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks, where John and I will again talk about our experience at Ice and Fire Con, and probably have some of our friends that were there as guests to share their experience as well. Okay, this time for real. Peace and be excellent to each other. Bye.
Bye.